And good morning. Steve, once again, thanks for bringing that hymn to us this morning about the kingdom. And we're going to carry that idea on further as we examine Jesus's interaction with Pilate. We're looking at one verse today, and it's going to really set up for next week. A very enigmatic verse. Um, and interpretations of this verses are all over the map. This whole section where Pilate says, "What is truth?" So this morning, we're going to move towards that verse of next week in 1838. And I've entitled this one, as we move to set that up for next week, "A King, but of a different kind." And I think that's really important. Jesus, a king, but he's a different kind of king. John 18:37, we read it, and I've titled this one, "You are king." Pilate said to him, Jesus, "So you're a king?" Question mark. That's where they are in this. We're picking up this dialogue already in progress. Jesus answered, "Pilate, you say correctly that I am a king." He adheres and acknowledges that term. And then he goes and starts to define what this is. Earlier in verse 36, I think it's verse 36, Jesus said, "My kingdom is not of this world." And then at the end of the same verse, he says, "For my kingdom is not of this realm." So he is differentiating to Pilate his king. Yes, he is a king of a kingdom, but his kingdom is somehow different. "For this purpose I have been born, and for this I have come into the world." And then he defines it, "to testify to the truth." His kingdom is connected, according to the words of Jesus, to truth. Now, this is really important because in Pilate's realm, kingdom is exclusively about territorial domination. It has to do with geography, a geographic area that is under the rulership of some sovereign, and that is how Pilate understands kingdom. Jesus is saying that he is a king, but his kingdom is different and is correlated to the idea of truth. We'll go deeper. "Everyone who is of the truth," then Jesus ends verse 37, "everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice." So he's saying his kingdom is of the truth, and that those who are of the truth listen to his voice. The reason for this, I tie to what Jesus stated. I don't think there's an intentional tie in here, like read this verse and go back and read this verse, and it becomes like a puzzle to solve. But I adhere to the idea that Jesus is the truth. He doesn't, yes, he speaks the truth, but he is the truth. John 14:6, "I am the way, I am the truth, and I am the life." So if we want to see truth, we look to the person of Jesus, is the idea. And we'll proceed. Now, from the 30,000-foot perspective, Jesus and Pilate are in conversation. Fellas, I need to be very clear that that statement right there is not in a line with, I would say, the majority of conservative interpreters. I did a research on it, and it's in one of the slide sets, but the majority of interpreters view Pilate as a villain, and that he is entirely being dismissive to interacting with Jesus. Now, that that view is more in line with the synoptics, but it is clear that John, the writer of the fourth gospel, is depicting Pilate in a different manner, and I'm making a stab at how to understand it. And I take the view, along with some, that there's actually communication going on. They're in a conversation, and to some degree, Pilate is understanding, but he's not being dismissive of the person of Jesus from my perspective. Here, Jesus moves the conversation forward through describing what his no threat kingdom is about. He's saying, I'm a king, but I am no threat to you. We're talking here apples and oranges. Jesus is saying, regardless of whatever earthly rule is under discussion, whatever kingdom territorially we're talking about, in this case, Rome, his rule, Jesus's rule, is not about geographic domination and advancement. This does not apply. And again, this is my interpretation of what's happening. Jesus is making it clear he's a king, but his kingdom is no threat to the Roman Empire because it's not a geographic definition. Rather, and because his kingdom is of a different realm, his kingdom is about objective truth. Jesus ties kingdom to truth. And when I use the word objective truth, I'm talking about truth that is true regardless of anyone adhering to it or not. It's like gravity. Gravity is objectively true. I can believe in it, and I don't have to believe in it, but it doesn't change the state of that truth. And I think that's what Jesus is tying his kingdom to. That which actually exists, that which is actually real, objective truth, regardless of anybody's belief. He's talking about that which is actually real all of the time. And that is in contrast to subjective experience. Subjective experience is how you and I observe what we think is true, and then we interpret that and our actions flow out of that. We're going to go into a little more detail here in a little bit, but it's important to know there are two different terms here, objective truth and subjective experience. When people say, well, it's your truth and my truth, I don't really buy that. It's your experience and my experience. There is only one objective truth, and Jesus is that truth. Subjective experience, which is known selectively and on occasion by individuals or groups. That is experience. So that's heady. I realize that, but this is a very, I wouldn't call it confusing, but enigmatic section. And it culminates with Pilate saying, well, what is truth? I am attempting to give explanation to how I understand that. So we can think of this. I'm going to draw an illustration here of how I understand this. And I realize it's a metaphor. Jesus didn't use my stick drawings here. I understand that. But it's a way that we can get into this moment and give some meaning to it. The verse stands, and this is my illustration. And I'd like us to start in the physical realm with what I call the foundation, the footer. It's Dave, from a construction background, all of us understand that under every building that exists, there's some sort of foundation that rests on the very bedrock of what that foundation is, and that's the footer. The footer is where everything starts in any kind of structure. So I could put the term footer there, but it's foundation. Foundation is everything. To any physical reality has a foundation structure. That's what I call objective truth. That foundation stands regardless and is the basis for everything. And that is the category of which where I put Jesus. Jesus and the incarnation is God's objective truth to humankind. Objective truth, foundation. Now, on top of the footer, of course, we have the foundation walls, but to simplify the metaphor, I use one structural element called pillar. We could use the word column, we could use a number of different terms, but I use the term pillar for a reason that I'll get to in a minute. A pillar is something that starts at the foundation and then extends, resting on that foundation, moving vertically, and it's holding something, and I'll get to that. Now, guys, I'm slowing this down just so we can get into how I understand what's happening. The pillar represents subjective experience. So we got objective truth and we got subjective experience. This is not truth. This is my experience of the truth. And this is where we tend to go south as people, where we blend these two together and we think it's all one. And it's not. It's just simply not true. There is objective truth and there is subjective experience. And this is what this combination, this very simple little diagram, is what I would call a belief structure. So I think Pilate is being drawn by Jesus into a belief structure that Pilate cares about, this idea of truth. He's trying to understand truth. And in his mind, it is a combination, truth, what is true and what is experience. They're in a philosophical realm not because Jesus needs it, Pilate is needing it. And so Jesus is interacting with him about this, and it's tying it to the kingdom. Belief structure consists of objective truth and subjective experience. Now, one's belief structure, and this is what I just said, consists of subjective experience based on objective truth. So there's what is objectively true, and there's my response to it. That's subjective experience. And belief structure is what determines, here's why I call it a pillar, because at the top of the pillar is my actions. That is what demonstrates what I believe, my actions, my words and my actions. Therefore, my words and actions express my belief structure. And guys, this is true for every human being. We all have a belief structure that is demonstrated by actions and words. I would put words there too. Now, let's complicate this even a little more. I am going somewhere with this, guys, so please be patient. So we've got objective truth, subjective experience, we've got actions, okay? So we got to complicate this. It's not this simple. It's just, have you ever heard people, and I've said this, I just follow the Bible. Well, today in our experience, there are 40,000 plus denominations of people who have split over differences, and they all say we just follow the Bible. It's just not true. I mean, very quick within this interaction, we move from objective truth to subjective experience. And the pillar really looks like this. It's a little, so I'm going to take the pillar out and we're going to build the pillar in a more, what I think is a more realistic explanation. Okay, we have objective truth and we're observing. And every one of us has filters by which we view, they're like colored glasses, that we're looking at objective truth. And those are lenses, those are filters. I view Christianity and the Bible because of where I was born, to the class of people. I'm white, and I view it a certain, and I was raised in a very conservative group of people. Steve and I share the same background of loving people, a wonderful, I'm very grateful for my background, but as Steve said just a little bit ago, he has become a different person. That's true, and so have I. But it's because of the recognition of these filters. The people that stay are not wrong. That's where they choose to be, and that is absolutely fine. But through recognition of filters, we tend to grow. Filters. And filters then lead to biases. Biases are beliefs, or biases are beliefs that I start to determine what's in and what's out, the two arrows. What's good, what's not so good. I create biases. And some of my biases are okay, but most of my biases really are subject to criticism. I need to really take a look at this. This is really hard for us as people. The third box of the pillar is actually represented by the little image speaker, and that's my beliefs. So I don't move. It's unrealistic to think that I can move from foundation, that which is objective truth, that which I see in Jesus, without recognition of my filters, my biases, and my beliefs through my particular tribe. Then and only then do I move to action. I don't move. My beliefs then lead to action. So it's not like I can say I just follow the Bible. Honestly, guys, I believe that's an impossibility. And I think 2,000 years of history has borne that out quite clearly in the Protestant denominations. Protestant, it's just we don't all agree. And it's because of our filters, our biases, and our beliefs. Now, I am going somewhere with this. Our pillar towards action, I'm building a basis because it's a way of explaining the exchange between Pilate and Jesus. So that's why this slide. Our pillar towards action consists of these components. Some of this is known, probably most of it is unknown. Growth as a person, as a human being, is becoming aware of these influences. When I become aware, if I stay where I am, wonderful. That's fine. But it's becoming aware of this, of how I'm being influenced by these things. It's not bad. It's part of being human. And it certainly informs how I interact with people, especially the ones I love and care about. Now let's get back to our text. I've got this little image here, and let's get back to our story. Okay, Jesus connects the term king to truth. He says, you're a king right here. Jesus answered, said, I'm a king for this purpose. I've been born, and for this, he still hasn't stated anything. I have come into the world. This is my purpose. And here is what kingship means: truth. I testify to the truth. And everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice. So Jesus is making a connection. That's an observation. Again, we're attempting to interpret this. How Jesus, and the word king is a trigger word. Pilate is very familiar with people who have come in times past and who have claimed to be the Messiah of the Jewish Messiah, king. And all of those people have been prosecuted and killed. And kingdom is a trigger threat word to the Roman Empire. Caesar wants no equal, he doesn't want a competitor. And king is a trigger word. And that's going to come up later in the text. How Jesus uses this trigger word, he's not afraid. He says, yes, I'm a king, but I'm not of the kind of king you think. And observation, Pilate is not in alarm. On the contrary, Pilate goes to Jesus's defense. Now, listen, I'm not casting Pilate as this angel here. He's got his issues just like the rest of us. But I don't think he's being dismissive, because if he were being dismissive, he would just say, get him out of here, go crucify him. But through interaction with Jesus, there's a high degree of hesitancy that he's experienced. This guy's in conflict, and his pressure, he is under a huge amount of pressure. And that is primarily true as depicted within John's gospel, not so much in the synoptics, and we're not going to go into all of that. So I'm just talking about here. Observation, the trigger word king does not put Pilate into tilt. Pilate, so this is my opinion, Pilate is absorbing, at least to some degree. We don't know how much, but he's attempting to communicate with Jesus, and he's hearing somewhat of what Jesus is saying about his kingdom as not of this realm. That's the subject. And it is connected, which means it's connected to truth. Nothing to do with geography. Nothing. It has to do with objective reality. Pilate is functioning as one who is tracking with Jesus, if from my opinion, as if he is aware to some degree of the difference between objective truth and subjective experience. Fellas, again, my disclaimer, I think I have a disclaimer. Note, this is how I'm attempting to make sense out of what's going on. And it's not shared by everyone for sure, but this is how I'm trying to explain it. No way were they having a talk about objective truth and subjective experience, but they were circling the wagons around this idea, of which I've attempted to explain it through my little illustration here. Okay, so I'm saying communication is occurring. Pilate is engaged and not dismissive. As Jesus responds in part B of this text, part B is, everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice. We're going to look at that. I think they're engaged in communication around the subject of kingdom, how Jesus's kingdom is different, and how it's tied to what is true. And Pilate is engaged within that conversation. As Jesus responds in part B of this text, Pilate is able to listen to what he's saying. Again, I think he's listening. He hears Jesus saying that he has purpose. First of all, in the that would be the right prior to what I call part B. He says, "For this purpose I've been born." So he sees that Jesus has got a mission, a purpose. That purpose is to testify to the truth. And the truth is the objective reality, that which actually exists. That's going to prompt his question in verse 38. Now, I think the point here that is critical is that objective reality is not the same as subjective experience. And that is where we humans get mixed up. We tend to put it all together as objective truth. Thus is why there are so many splits and misunderstandings and power moves and so forth today. We really have a hard time discerning what is actually true here and what is my interpretation or experience of that. And Jesus is stating that he is testifying to the truth, and everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice. Let me make an attempt at that. He's saying truth is different than experience. The point, what Jesus is communicating, is setting up Pilate's response in verse 38. Well, he says, well, then what is truth? And I am taking the liberties to suggest what might be behind that statement. It's bringing Pilate to a point of, well, then how do we define, how do we understand what is true? And I think it was a thoughtful response, not a dismissive response, is how I'm presenting it. Now, being of the truth. All right. Jesus is saying that at any given moment, this is, again, the position I've taken. You know, we tend to read this because of our upbringings, and I'm putting myself in this realm, is that everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice. So we go through and I read the text as, okay, that means those who are in, Christians, and that those who are out, Christians. So I don't think this is anything has to do with where Jesus's mind is. He's not defining those who are in and those who are out. I take the view that he's saying that at any given moment in time, regardless of a person's ethnicity, social status, their moment of existence when they live, if they are listening at that moment versus and what that means is versus their own constructs, they're at a point where they're willing to let go of how they have framed reality because of some need, and they're listening to a voice that exists. And I believe that voice is the universal spirit of the living God. Now, this is my interpretation, but I think God's voice has been there from the get-go and has been manifested in human flesh through the person of the Jesus of Nazareth, the incarnation. But God has always been engaged. And when a person living whenever is in a place of listening, I think God's voice is present. Now, guys, that could be right or wrong, or right to some degree and wrong to some degree. But again, it's how I'm attempting to bring meaning to what we're uh, studying. Jesus says, "Everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice." And I think he's not just throwing out some religious statement here. If you pray to receive Christ, you're going to be in here. I have that has nothing to do with it. He's saying that I testify to the truth, and everyone who has existed, if you're listening to my voice, you too are of the truth at that moment. And it's his truth leads to life. It kingdom reality right now. So here, truth and foundation I tie together. The Jesus represents truth. He is truth, according to his own admission. And he is the one who is listening, uh, testifying to the truth. He is showing us what truth is. Pilate hears Jesus' voice because he is listening to Jesus. Okay, this is my perspective. He is able to listen because he has laid aside at this moment his own constructs. So I think he's engaged and he's listening to some degree. And Jesus is inviting him at this moment, Pilate, if you listen to me, you are of the truth at this moment. So I'm looking at this exchange as even here, Jesus is engaging this one who is holding the power of life and death physically and inviting him to listen. So at this moment, Pilate, in the words of Jesus, is of the truth. That's the conclusion I've come to. That Pilate is listening. So at this moment, he is listening to truth. Now, here's our table time. I've really tried to move fast, guys. Um, there is a lot here. We'll pick it up next week. In our text, Jesus does not defend himself, which we would think would be natural, or does he condemn Pilate? I think that's clear in the text. Instead, he invites the one holding power over life and death to hear the truth. This is my understanding of what is happening. Jesus is offering invitation to Pilate. This moment anticipates the cross where love will be extended. Love extends its reach to all of humanity at the cross. Father, forgive them. They have no idea what they're doing. Since we have examined Jesus's words to Pilate as an invitation, and that's what I'm presenting, invitation, rather than a defense or confrontation. The question I have out for us, you guys may have questions about this and we can talk about it. I apologize, we don't have more time. We got about 15 minutes. How does this way of thinking shape or reshape your understanding of what it means to follow Christ, especially in our current context of power, injustice, and a tremendous amount of misunderstanding? Guys, the floor is open, and I would love to hear your thoughts as I have made I've made an attempt, fellas. So it's your time to respond. So thank you. Oh, that was a lot of information.
Mike, as we're going through this, I'm thinking, I don't know how this whole interaction transpired, but
Yeah.
regardless, whether it was a conversation where they're just talking normally or whether Pilate is being sarcastic in his question with what is truth. I don't think that matters. What you've said, at least as I understand it, is that truth is truth is truth. Jesus is truth, and he's telling Pilate that. He's telling everyone that. What happens, and what I don't even know how to phrase it, but what is important at that point, and my verse says, Everyone on the side of truth listens to me." So I'm a little confused with all of that, but the important part is the response. So what do we do with that as an individual? And you see, that's what uh, makes us, and you said in or out. And I tend to kind of almost lean that direction. I'm still wrestling with that. But
Yeah, yeah,
what the difference between those who believe the truth, believe in Christ, is that they have responded with a yes, I believe. Those that don't have heard the truth but have responded in it, no, I don't believe. And I don't know where Pilate falls in that.
yeah.
He does walk out later on, and we see that where he says, "I wash my hands of all of this. I find nothing that says I should put this man to death." Um, but that in itself is not a response that I believe him. I just don't have enough evidence to put him to death. But I think what we're seeing is that his response is not a yes, I believe, and he may be even reserving uh, what he actually wants to do with all of this. But I think that's the difference between a Christian and someone who is outside of the faith, is that they have uh, either not yet decided that he is truth and he is right, or they have decided that he is not.
Thanks, Jeff. And yeah, I think we categorically, generally want to say, well, is Pilate going to believe or not believe? I think he goes away as a very defeated man. I mean, this guy is under tremendous pressure, and I'm going to build that as we come. And I don't think the point here is Pilate in or out. The point of what we're seeing is the unending, relentless patience and invitation of God in the human flesh, even to the one who is treating him so horrendously. And it to me, it's not about Pilate's belief or not belief. To me, it is about the in the revelation of who God is in the face of what we humans do to God at this time. Is that may not have said very good, but does that communicate?
It does a little bit. I mean, what I'm, I guess, grappling with um, is when Christ says, "My purpose, I have come to testify to the truth." Well, does that mean I've come to testify to the truth that yes, indeed, I am a king, and my kingdom is not of this world? Or is it, I have come to testify to all that is truth, all that God says is truth? I don't know what
Yeah, yeah,
his statement is, and therefore there are lots of people, including Pilate, that do ask that question. Okay, so what is truth?
right. Yeah,
We as Christians believe that truth is truth, and God's truth is is spoken through his word, but they're of the opinion, and you've changed it because it's not objective truth, it's subjective experience that they're actually talking about. But they're in their mind saying, well, what's truth for you is not necessarily truth for me, So I think Pilate's question was actually, yeah, what a lot of people ask, what is truth?
Yeah,
And Jesus said, I have come to testify to the truth. To me, that means I'm coming to testify to you about all that God is and that I am
the truth.
truth.
Yeah. Well, this is all over our heads here, but we're making an attempt. There's two hands up. I think Bill, you had your hand up first, but
Give it to Tatsi. I
Tatsu's
talk
got
too much.
what's that?
Give it to Tatsi. I talk too much.
Tatsi,
Uh,
what's your thought, Tatsi?
my thought is when I was growing up, there was a real split in terms of Catholics versus Presbyterians or whatever, okay, versus Protestants. And we always looked at the Catholics as being, works, okay? In other words, throwing money in collection on Friday, or if you eat meat, you're throwing an extra. Well, anyway, I had one experience that changed that whole
Oh,
thing later on in life, okay?
yeah,
When I
yeah.
became a believer, and I went to a meeting and I heard Brennan Manning speak.
Oh, yeah.
And Brennan Manning actually got me to listen and to really hear the heartbeat of Christ by, taking that passage, the King James version of listening to the heartbeat of Christ and hearing the truth of that's what that's what it's all about. Is Christ is gives you when you hear his heartbeat, you hear the heartbeat of love, and love is what he's done when he offered himself on the cross. And it made me realize that, our belief systems uh, are and the differences that we have in our denominations and what you've been talking about today has been on the basis of works rather than the belief that the heartbeat of Christ is love. And it made me realize that uh, Brennan Manning was a born again Christian, okay, with the same beliefs, basic beliefs that a born again Christian has. So anyway, um, that's what I found is that our belief system is really should be based upon that. And anyway,
I,
that was my thought.
I think what I'm hearing you say is that it ties back to it's an illustration of tying back to our little foundation and pillar that you believed a certain way about another group that claimed to follow Catholics. And at a moment in time, Brennan Manning helped you see that maybe there's a different way to look at that.
Hmm.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, yeah,
That would
yeah.
be a recognition moment of filters. And I
Mhm.
think, Tatsu, we all have filters. And the body of Christ exists to help us, hopefully outside of our own tribe, because our tribe tends to, everyone kind of supports what we're doing, and that has a good side and a not so good side. But as we listen to especially those that maybe have a little different view, we actually can learn a great deal if we allow it. But for many of us, it's threatening. It's just too, no, he's off. I'm just gonna categorize that as off, and we're not gonna go there. But the unfortunate thing, we're cutting ourselves off by doing that. If a person is claiming to follow Christ, let's listen to him. We might learn something.
Yeah.
Yeah. So other thought. Thanks, Totsi. Other thoughts. I wish we had an hour to talk about this, but wait.
Okay.
Okay, Bill. All righty. You're
Go
on.
back to that slide showing the foundation and the tower that we build on top of it.
Do you want the breakdown?
Well, no, yeah, but that without the X. Okay, that one.
That you want the
Well,
not just pillar, but you want the
well,
component?
we have the foundation. We call that the truth, and even that's difficult because what we have is verbiage that we heard some of what Jesus said, and people wrote it down, and they kind of pass it forward. And that's basically all we have. So people say, "I want to get back to the Bible. My church is all
Right.
messed up, and there's something wrong with our beliefs." And say, "I want to go back down to the foundation." Well, okay, do that. Your next step is to start building it again, and it's inevitable, and you can't help it. You're going to build it on your filters.
Right. Yeah.
And your filters may have changed. So you could have a different tower there and two
Yeah.
towers. Now you have two denominations.
Right.
And someone else goes, no, now you have three denominations. And of course, nobody asked the question. The Catholic Church, and I'm going to butcher this because I'm not Catholic, they tended to lean on the word, tradition, and a couple other things. But there were three or four things came together to determine the theology. And so when we had the Franciscans come in, who are totally whack jobs compared to the Jesuits or the Benedictines or whatever, they made room for it. They said, okay, let's have a few towers on this foundation.
Yeah.
When the Protestants came in, and Martin Luther said, no, we're just doing scripture only, sola scriptura. You're just a scripture, forget all the traditions, and that's going to lead us to the truth. It didn't. They had all these foundations. The only difference was when there's another pillar, they didn't allow them to coexist. They broke off and started the true church,
right,
and another true church, and the Yellow Pages testify to that.
Yeah.
And that, I find this fascinating. But what's interesting is this tower represents for me orthodoxy, correct thinking. But when you get to the top, and what are your actions? Do you believe different than someone else, but suddenly you both behave the same way in terms of helping the poor or reaching out to people? You know, Mormons' actions aren't much different than Protestants' actions, the Catholic actions when they get out in the field and they're trying to do good. So the question I have is, I think you'll find that orthopraxy is a much easier way to come together in agreement than orthodoxy, that vertical pillar. And I'm just butchering it, but my head's spinning about this, trying to come up with some thoughts. And that's all I'll say for now.
Thank you, Bill. And now we're going to end on that. But Jesus was very much about orthopraxy, very much about orthopraxy. But underlying his orthopraxy was his relationship with the Trinity, with God. He always refers to that. Here we get some little window into a philosophical discussion what is underlying orthopraxy actions. Now that is one way to frame it, but we got to deal with the text. What on earth did Pilate mean when he said, "What is truth?" And there are so many different ways to look at that and cast that, and I respect these attempts. We got to respect that. This is one explanation of the realm of which they might be talking about. So next week, fellas, we'll look at verse 1838 as we continue on. We're bringing chapter 18 to a closure, but boy, there is a lot here. We're going to focus in the next couple of weeks on what is happening to this guy Pilate. What is going on as explained in the Gospel of John. So thank you guys for coming. Thanks. We didn't have a lot of time for a lot of interaction and a lot of information. And this will be posted if you want to see these on the, it'll be on the website tomorrow. So whatever. Thank you for your patience, guys. We'll see you next week. Bye for now.